Thanks, Tony, and thanks again to JMR for the opportunity as well to present with them. I think when I saw those videos earlier, the first video, I actually got quite emotional and started crying, just to look at how quickly we implemented in such a short space of time, So, and I think normally, insurance is such a boring subject. And I think if you look at our T-shirt here, love being you, this is what we issue to all our staff when they join us. And we, for example, won now the top 10 companies to work for in the UK recently. Although YuLife actually only started in 2017 in the UK, so we're quite established there already, having 5% of the group risk market share there already. And we raised £3 million then, and so far we've raised $6 million. And we're now in the UK, we're establishing ourselves in Japan, in the US, Australia, and now we recently, about a year ago, launched in South Africa. So just a little bit of background about YuLife. Very welcome to go to our website as well to learn more about us. So I just want to take you a little bit through, how we see insurance and how we see, the insurance model of the future from our perspective. So I think, firstly, most of us in the room have insurance. We work in the insurance industry, our lives are covered, and it's one of the biggest industries globally. It's got 6 trillion in assets. And the main concept and idea of insurance is spreading of risk. And this concept has existed for a long time. And I'll talk a little bit about the history of that in the next slide. And all of us, I think the thing about insurance is it's something that people don't wake up in the morning and say they would love to buy an insurance policy, So it's really a grudge purchase. You need it, but you don't really want to pay it, and you don't see value on an immediate basis. But the insurance industry has an extremely important role to play. The concept of insurance, dates back, and it was very interesting looking at the history of insurance and where we started. And actually, the first, the history of insurance is in tablets of the Babylonians, in 1750 BC before, and this is where guys actually insured their shipment and their cargo, and if the car, and they had to use repay the cargo, use the cargo as a loan for repayment, and then the modern insurance really started more in the medieval Europe, where craftsmen needed to make goods for trade. And their houses were made of wood, so there was a lot of fire, and then often experiences, that it burned down. And so guilds were born and act as a type of insurance fund to provide masters to rebuild their practice, and also, if there were deaths and so on, to provide them. So that's sort of the, how insurance started. And it's very interesting. After that, then Lloyd's of London started with the shipping and the underwriting of marine insurance, and they're still existing. It's an amazing building there in London. I lived in London for 5 years, so it was really incredible to sort of understand that insurance and insurance history in there. So insurance has been, I think it's also interesting that the first life insurance policy was issued in 1583, but at that time, people didn't really understand risk, so most of the people made losses on the premium, so they couldn't really price it properly. And then Edmund Halley actually designed the first mortality tables in 1693, and from then onwards, we could price life insurance a lot better, and then the industry started to thrive. And it's also quite interesting that a lot of the policy wording that we have now is about 200 years old, So there's been a huge amount of history in the insurance industry, and some of those companies in the UK are over 300 years old. So what has got wrong with the industry? So I think there's a lot going right for the industry, but what has actually gone wrong? And I think the big thing for us is, actuaries are taught about risk and probabilities, but insurers are not really understanding the client needs and how this has changed over the years. And it used to be a black box, people don't really understand their insurance policies. There's a lot of mis-selling in the industry, and that really forced the regulator to change the industry, because the industry couldn't really regulate itself. So we got these new, commission regulations and TCF and disclosure regulations forcing this industry to be very risk and compliance focused. You're not really focusing on what the need is of the end consumer. And there's a huge amount of legacy systems and processes, given that it is such an old industry. And it's very difficult for these large companies to really adapt to new technology. still policies are mainly sold and not bought. People are not standing in queues to buy insurance, and it's a very boring industry. I mean, it's really, really boring. And how do we create fun and change that experience for clients? The industry is also, there's very little engagement. So you might only hear from your insurer when there's something going wrong, when there's a policy, premium increase, or when you need to claim. It's one of the least trusted industries. 68% of people don't trust it, and don't really fully understand what they're getting and what they're buying. And there's also this huge chronic illness, that we could actually prevent. And through technology now, there's a huge amount we can do to move away from these and actually help to prevent people from getting sick. So the problem one that we need to solve is insurance is not fun. No one wants to engage with their insurance app. People are on Instagram and Facebook and playing games the whole time on their mobile phones, but you don't even think about it, your insurance policies on a day-to-day basis. And tech is focused on being functional, so if you look at all the insurance apps and so on, it's very functional. You look at your policy details, but there's no engagement. There's no reason for you to really be there on a regular basis. And it's also very practical and logical and not attractive to really engage and use. And it's always, a lot of these apps is always built with a buyer in mind. So thinking about the HR person or the broker, and not really thinking about the end consumer when designing these tools. The next problem is no one wants to engage with their insurance company. It's like I said, it's there's this fear factor that is attached to insurance, and it's only when things really go wrong. It's very complex. People don't fully understand it. And then the third problem is insurance is stuck in the dark ages. We have a lot of legacy, a lot of mergers, acquisitions over years. There's a huge amount. If I think about, one of the examples is like Kodak, for example, invented the digital camera, but then they didn't invest in that, and then they died. And I think the message really is, if we don't innovate, we're going to die. So, and how can we think differently? And I think this is where, insurtechs have started about 10 years ago. Before that, fintechs and fintech, and then followed by insurtechs. Because these large companies really struggle to innovate internally. And before I started YuLife, I actually created an external innovation unit for a large South African insurance company. And I traveled the world, looked at 700 different startups and, insurtech startups, and created a venture capital fund to invest in them. And you see all these different concepts and new things, but it is so difficult for large companies to adopt them. You're sitting with large sort of centralized IT teams, you're sitting in queues and waiting for your IT deliverables, So I think internal innovation is extremely difficult. And how can we learn from other industries and partnering with insurtechs to actually create a business model that could potentially even disrupt your own business model and cannibalize your existing business. And I think people need to think differently and start to partner. I think, if you look at I recently read this book called The TikTok Boom. And, attention span of people are now at 8 seconds. I think if you don't draw someone's attention in 8 seconds, you've lost them, And I think from an insurance perspective, we haven't really adopted to how users are now using mobile phones and tech, and really, and also people are immediate gratification. They need instant reaction. And there's also a huge overload of information. So how do you actually change people to actually engage with us as an industry and create trust? So the industry is also very reactive, So if you think about in group risk, 1 out of 1,000 people will really, benefit from them. If you look at EAP programs and virtual GP services, maybe 2 out of 1,000 or 2 out of 100 will benefit. And wellness programs currently, just cater for the elite. They cater for those people that are in the top of the pyramid, they're highly, active and so on. But what about the rest of the population? And I think one of the aims that we want to get to is to actually engage the whole population and provide well-being every day for everyone. And I think, one of our big philosophies is simplicity. I think, a lot of the wellness programs and insurance solutions out there is extremely complex for the man on the street to understand. And it's easy things to do. You don't need to run marathons. Just get walking. How can we use simple, easy, measurable things that people actually are achievable? And so we need to create a new insurance model. So the one thing we need to, that we really believe in is to go away from I win, you lose to a win-win economy and a win-win solution that actually everyone can benefit. The insurance company can benefit, the individual and society as a whole. We are an extremely values-based company, and three of our values is to create a win-win, so that is a value that we have as a company. Also to build the world that we want to live in, that we actually want to create something, because there's a lot of times we become victims, and I think for us it's about creating that world that we want to live in, and to also give more than you can take, and really build trust with the end consumer. I also think to create sustainability. So we're also big on ESG, where we're giving back, either food or for planting trees, and we're really helping companies in a fun way to create a win-win for everyone. So one of the solutions that when we thought about how do we change insurance, is to first focus on prevention. And we use this FOG model, where we wanted to make it, it easy for people and to be motivated to get going. And small steps like just walking, for 5 minutes, or meditating for 5 minutes. You don't have to run marathons and be an extreme athlete. And once people get going in small steps and they engage, then we can see that encourages them to actually do more and more. So I think it's using the Atomic Habits, and which is a great book as well to read, where small steps can make a huge difference and over time. And then we also looked at, at the time we launched, mobile gaming was starting to go through the roof. So we looked at, other industries and what are they doing, and how can we actually get people to really engage. And so if you look at Pokemon Go, is one of the most successful. It's still the most successful app that actually got people active. But the thing with Pokemon, it never told you to walk. You had to go and get these Pokemons all over, and it warned you with messages and so on, but it never actually said to you must walk. And so the thing is that in a gamified way, it got people walking and became one of the most engaging apps in the world. So we looked at these apps, and and then thought about how can we use this gamified technology to really change people's behavior. And then also to prioritize feeling over function. People are inspired and motivated by different things. There's some, with rugby, if you think about rugby or sport and so on, a lot of even people that are watching it feel that they are part of it. They'll feel motivated and they're part of it. And how can you use that and create a really fun engagement with people, watching comedies, and people are also inspired by different things. I like mountain biking, I love it, and some people like yoga. So you need to also, understand what motivates people, and then get, and then enable people with different motivations to actually engage and participate. If you look at Duolingo, so it has always been very difficult for people to learn a new language, and they are just making it, very easy. If you see they say they're not an education company, they're a fun and motivation company. And that is also from an insurance perspective. If you just think about it differently and you start to think about how can you make it fun and motivate people to actually trust you and engage with you. And that is one of the core values that we have as a company as well. And then our Josh Hart, our CTO, he's really the heart of our game and our app that we developed. Says emotions could be the difference between a good insurance product and a great one. So when we launched, we actually got one of the designers of Candy Crush in to help us develop the game. And that was really an incredible experience. We looked at other wellness programs in the market, and they were all very boring with like 2-3% engagement rates. And then we got this app in. We were wondering, why does Candy Crush have 18 million daily active users? And I still use Candy Crush on level 475 or something, and very difficult level, and trying to get through that. So we use that inspiration from the gamification and that addictive behavior. So, okay, how can we use this to get people to live a healthy lifestyle? And then the third is embrace world-class tech. And this is quite difficult to do, but that's an example. If you think about Apple, we in our generation, I've been in the industry for 30 years now. When the smartphone was developed, that is the first phone that really revolutionized the industry. And I got my first Apple device, and now everything is Apple. So just learning from them, and how can you actually create the user experience that is slick. I used to, when I buy a new Apple device, you always keep the box as well. There's that presentation to the end consumer. That is also quite important. The whole client experience that you have with Apple, So just critically thinking about the whole experience, and not just about the product and the functions that you are creating. I always use the example, like, if a new iPhone comes out, people are standing in queues and sleeping outside to get it, but there's no one actually waiting for a new insurance product release, and waiting and sleeping outside to get their new insurance product. So this photo made me think, when I started my career at Sage Life 32 years ago, I did pension fund valuations, and we still did it paper-based, and we did some Fortran programming, was our first sort of programs, and we still, a lot of paper. We had those brown envelopes and fax machines, and we used to, the actuarial results would come out, and people would go 12 o'clock at night to the office to get the fax or the phone call from the UK to know whether you passed or not. So, and then, with cell phones and mobile phones came out. And a lot of insurance companies are still using green screens, AS400s, a lot of old technology. And I think there was, like, my previous company, also a huge discussion in just how do you move from the cloud, from behind your own firewalls to cloud, and what would be safer, and so the industry is just slow to make decisions. And big data and wearables, I think in 2009, we actually distributed the first downloadable pedometer to clients. It had a USB port, and you had to CD-ROMs, and that is just 14 years ago. And then, how difficult it was to get data from your wearable device, and now data is just so easily available. So it's always, you're sitting on this amazing amount of data, but what do we do now with it, and how do we make our processes and our interactions with the clients easier, and actually adopt to this new technology? And we believe we need to move to this world, and this is how insurance should be. It should focus on prevention. We should think about ecosystems, and you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to have this mentality where your own IT team always knows the best and can do it themselves. But how do you embrace, that what insurtechs are doing? If you look at, for example, platforms as well, like Amazon, Amazon does not have all the products. They create the platform through which people can actually sell their products. So there's different models that are evolving in the insurtech and insurance industry. And it's very difficult to adopt to those, but we believe, I think COVID has helped a lot to get us to this new world, but there's still a lot to be done. And I just want to encourage people to, embrace working with tech companies. We ourselves, we have very few actuaries, and we actually mostly have tech guys working on the app and working on games and so on. So it's a really fun environment to work in. And I think just in closing, at YuLife, we do not sell insurance, but our mission is to inspire people to live their best lives. So it's for us not just about the insurance product. It's actually about how do we get people to live their best lives. And that is it from me.